Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today, and we are going to talk about the genes required to win in bodybuilding. You hear people talk about genetics a lot, and they speak of it in ambiguous terms, like what genetics does it actually take to win in bodybuilding? There are many different factors that need to be considered if you're going to be successful in bodybuilding, many different genetic advantages that certain people have, and we're going to dig into all those in just 1 second. So I don't want this video to discourage you if you feel like you kind of have crappy genetics for bodybuilding. You don't have to have great genetics to enjoy your bodybuilding journey. There's a lot of people that go out and compete in local shows that are never going to be a pro or just are recreational gym bro bodybuilders, and that is perfectly fine and acceptable. It's all about enjoying your journey and loving your life and getting the most out of life. So don't feel like this is poo-pooing on you, but there are certain people that are gifted and have an advantage to be top level bodybuilders. It's just like anything else. I used to love playing basketball, and I realized at a certain point that I did not have what it took to be an NBA player. I love playing basketball. I played basketball a ton, but I didn't have the size. I didn't have the athleticism that was required to play in the NBA at a high level. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't go out and play some recreational basketball, ref games, and really enjoy myself. It's the same thing with the NFL. There's certain people that are just gifted with certain genetics that are required to play in the NFL. And bodybuilding is no different than that. And it changes at various levels. Like you might have enough to get to the national stage, but never win a national show. You might have enough to do okay at a local show, but never win a local show. You might have enough to be a pro, but never be a top pro. So there are varying degrees of genetics, but there are several key pieces of genetic advantage that I think people need if you want to be a top level pro. And I think most top level pros, I'm talking about the guys on the Olympia stage, have these genes in common. First and foremost is the ability to eat and assimilate food. I can't tell you how vital that is, the ability to eat food. There are a lot of dudes that just don't have the appetite required to eat enough food to be a big open class bodybuilder. Now, maybe you can force the food down. There's also people that have digestive issues. I struggle with digestive issues. I have for a long time, and sometimes it's very difficult for me to get the food down. I don't know that I could actually eat enough food to be a 300-pound bodybuilder. I just don't think I could. I probably have close to my cap, about as big as I could possibly be, and I'm also 50 years old. Maybe if I'd pushed it when I was younger, I could, but digestion, the ability to eat and hammer food and to be able to do it over and over and over again and not wreck your stomach is a genetic gift. I know some guys that are high-level bodybuilders that I have talked to that can eat 7, 8, 9,000 calories a day and be just fine. If I did that, my stomach would be an absolute wreck. And I know a lot of people that are that way. So digestion is a big one. The ability to eat the food and to have the appetite to put that kind of food down. Continuing down that path is metabolism. And I know there's studies that show that for the most part, most people have pretty similar metabolisms, but there are genetic outliers. I've seen them. I've coached them. I've worked with them. These are people that can eat an ungodly amount of food and not get exceptionally fat. It's a gift. They can diet on high amounts of calories. And if you're on the opposite end, if you're somebody that has to take your food down to 1,200, 1,500 calories and you're a grown man, prep's going to suck. And there's a high probability that you're going to lose muscle. I have a very high metabolism. I did get a genetic gift in that area. I wouldn't say it's the most exceptional metabolism in the world, but I coach a lot of people, and I only know about 1 or 2 people that I coach that have a metabolism that are similar to mine. I got gifted with a metabolism, and it's a miracle that I actually got fat when I was in my 30s. I remember I would eat entire pizzas followed up by a pint of Ben & Jerry's for a single meal. And I would do that as dinner, and I would eat other giant meals during the day. This was before my stomach was a wreck. It's no wonder my stomach's all screwed up now. But I used to be able to eat just ungodly amounts of food. And I did get fat, but I wouldn't say that I was like morbidly obese. I probably was like 290, which for me, that's 30, 40 pounds over where I'm at right now. It was enough to give me some loose skin to have my stomach repair, but there was also some other stuff going on there. But the ability to have a crazy metabolism and be able to hammer down food. Now, you can affect your metabolism to a certain degree as you get bigger. The bigger you get, the more your metabolism is going to increase. But metabolism is sort of a genetic gift. My father was always tiny. My dad, 165, 170 pounds, and the dude could just throw food back and not get fat. I think the guy had abs until he was almost 60 years old. And then he's, started getting a little chubby then. But the ability to have a fast metabolism and be able to throw down food, that is a genetic gift that will help you in your bodybuilding journey. All right, folks, I want to take a quick break from this episode to tell you about the new e-course that Kurt Havens and I have put together, the scientific principles of anabolics and PEDs. This is the most comprehensive PED e-course ever put together with over 80 modules, including intros to PEDs, major steroid profiles, competitor off-season cycles, non-competitor cycles, contest prep cycles, HGH fundamentals, insulin fundamentals, side effect management, safer use concepts, fat loss agents, estrogen management, and advanced PED and hypertrophy science. It is the best course out there of its kind. Go check it out. Link is in the video description below. Let's talk about drugs, PEDs, response to drugs, the ability to take the drugs and have a response. And I've seen these guys. I know there's people that don't believe it. I've seen dudes that'll blow up just taking a TRT dose of testosterone. They're rare. They're uncommon. But there are guys that can take low doses and get massive. That's not to say that there aren't dudes that are blasting huge amounts of gear in the pros. There certainly are, but there are guys that are hyper responders and that grow. I don't remember the exact thing, but Kurt and I talked about it at some point. There's genetic factors that play into that, and I know they have isolated it to CAG repeats. I don't remember whether it was high or low, but the CAG repeats will indicate whether or not you're a high responder or a low responder. There is literally people that can take nothing and grow. I've heard stories, I won't name his name, but of a former Mr. Olympia that prepped for his first national show and won it on 300 milligrams. I think it was 300 milligrams of Deca is what I heard. And that was legit. We've all heard the stories about Ronnie Coleman being natural when he turned pro. So there are people that are hyper responders. Another factor to consider are people that can tolerate drugs, people that can tolerate and take huge doses of PEDs and still have good blood work. I've seen guys that'll run a small cycle, maybe some test, and a little bit of Anavar, and their blood work is completely blown out of the water. It looks terrible. And there are other dudes that can run 3-4 grams of gear, and nothing is out of whack. My blood panels tend to stay fairly decent running high doses of gear as long as I stay away from orals. I don't know. I seem to be a high responder to gear. I always have been. I remember when I was younger, I blew up on just taking, I think, 300 milligrams of Deca. It was my first injectable cycle, and I got big off of that. There's some people that can take ungodly amounts of gear and don't grow at all. And that's a horrible place to be. I've seen those guys. I've seen the guys that just take big doses and nothing happens. And that sucks. I wish I had an explanation for the tolerance of the drugs. It's a really weird thing. We all know that old pro bodybuilder that just blasted ungodly amounts of gear. It's like your uncle who drank and smoked his entire life and lived to be 90 years old. There are exceptions. They are genetic outliers. Another thing to consider is health and durability. And you'll see this in professional sports like football. You'll see that guy with oodles of potential. He might have all the physical skills, all the physical traits that are required to succeed. And you'll see it in bodybuilding as well. But then they just get injured and sick. They can't sustain the effort, the training, the food, the PEDs that are required to succeed as a top level pro. Their joints break down. They have injuries. They get sick. They have all kinds of problems. There's some people that just can't hold up to the rigor and wear and tear of being a professional athlete or being a pro bodybuilder. I can't tell you how many NFL players I've seen over the years. As a suffering Commanders fan, we always seem to draft the guys with all the potential, and then they get hurt and they never pan out to what they're supposed to be. And then there's that guy that ends up playing for 25 years, somebody like Tom Brady. I don't know how long he was in the NFL, but it was a long time. Guy played into his mid-40s and stayed relatively healthy his entire career and took a pounding. The ability to withstand the rigors of being a professional bodybuilder, health and injury-wise, are also very important if you want to be an elite level pro bodybuilder, because this is a long-term game. It takes a long time to achieve the type of mass that is required to be a pro bodybuilder. Something like 8 to 10 years, I would say. You have to be on PEDs, training hard, slamming food for 8 to 10 years. You have to do that and not get hurt. You have to do that and not get sick. You have to do that and not tear muscles, not tear tendons, and be able to sustain that to get to a point where you can be an elite level bodybuilder. We'll see it, the guys that have to retire young because they have injuries. Now, there are things you can do to work around this, but that is also a genetic gift. Now, here are the more obvious ones, the physical traits. You can see the guy who's brand new in the gym. I've seen young guys that just have great muscle bellies. Their muscle bellies, their physique, their bone structure, everything just flows perfectly to be a bodybuilder. Now, one cool thing now with all the different classes, we have classic, we have open bodybuilding, and we have men's physique. There is really a class that most people can fit into. It used to be if you weren't a person who could put on serious amount of mass, a big blocky physique, that you had no chance of succeeding in bodybuilding. But now there are classes for guys that may be a little bit smaller, men's physique, guys with smaller frames. There's sort of the in-between classes like classic physique, where maybe you couldn't quite achieve the level of size necessary to be an open bodybuilder, but you still have a great looking physique. That opens that door up. Now, still, like muscles, bellies, proportions, I've seen guys that can get huge and they just have hideous, ugly looking physiques because of the way their bone structure is. They have no balance. They don't have any flow to their physique. They look blocky and they'll never be a pro. They can get huge and they look terrible. That stinks to have the ability to be able to grow and get huge and still look awful because you don't have the sort of balance that's necessary. Maybe powerlifting would be a better sport for the guys like that. Guys that have big blocky physiques. So you need flow, you need bone structure, you need certain proportions and dimensions to how your physique is laid out to succeed in bodybuilder. I can see that early on with people. Like, you can look, guys that want to do men's physique usually have to have very, very tiny waists. They have to have a very tiny waist and wide shoulders. Guys that want to do classic are sort of somewhere in between. They still need to have a tiny waist and wide shoulders. And for open bodybuilders, that's where the more blocky guys tend to end up, is in that division. If you're a blocky guy, you can tend to get bigger. The guys with the bigger hips, guys with, the bigger rib cages tend to do better in bodybuilding than they would in some of the smaller classes. So that is a consideration, is what class do you fit into? And you have to have the genetics and the shape to fit in those classes. Height is another thing. Every sport, height plays a component in it. And bodybuilding is a weird one where being too tall is a disadvantage in bodybuilding. I'm probably at about the upper limit of what is reasonable for being successful in open bodybuilding. I'm around 6'2", just a hair under 6'2". You really don't see many successful open bodybuilders that are over 6'2", because it takes an ungodly amount of muscle to fill your frame out. For me, at 6'2", I have to be 280, 290 if I wanted to compete with the guys on the Olympia stage. For a guy that's 5'9" or 5'10", he might need to be 240 or 250. He doesn't have to accumulate as much tissue as I do, which is extremely difficult for a guy my size. And the physiques just don't always look as balanced. Now, with classic physique, tall guys seem to do well in classic physique because there's a weight cap. Tall guys seem to have that type of flow. And you see a guy like Wesley Vissers. You see a guy like Chris Bumstead. They're both tall guys. So maybe classic is a better division for a tall guy, but you don't see any 6'8" or 6'9" successful bodybuilders. They just don't exist. It's because it's too much real estate to fill out and the physiques will look goofy. Bodybuilding is a sport where it seems to be in that 5'5" to 5'10" range is optimal to be an open class bodybuilder, to be a successful open class bodybuilder. I've seen some tall men's physique guys, but to be an open class bodybuilder, you look at the guys on the Olympia stage. Derek Lunsford's not very big. Hadi Chupin's not very tall. Samson's tall. Most of these guys are not super tall. You'll see pictures I have posted of me with some of these guys, and I look like a giant next to them, height-wise, not size-wise, but I look like a giant next to them. I'm not exceptionally tall. I'm 6'1" 3/4. I'm just a hair under 6'2", but I look like 8-foot tall giant next to these dudes. And that's how short they are. Being shorter is sort of an advantage for bodybuilding. I would say, like I said, 5'5" to 5'10". I think most of the past recent Olympians have been around that 5'8" to 5'10" range. I don't know. But that seems to be the optimal height to be a successful bodybuilder. All right, folks. That's all I've got for you on this one. I'm sure I've missed some important genetics that are required for bodybuilding. If you can think of any other genes that are necessary to be a great bodybuilder, put them in the comment section below. Go check out our Anabolics e-course. It's fantastic. I have a link to it in the video description below. We have a free preview of it. It is really awesome. Thank you for all your support. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.